guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. I want to go over a little bit of investment advice, or at least what I've learned, and maybe something to kind of get you kick-started to think about how you can become independent, how you can put your money in your own pocket instead of making other people rich, and maybe improving your life for the future. You know, things are going to probably get pretty rough here soon. It looks like more than likely the inflation is not going to be slowing down, mostly because they can't raise interest rates too much to slow things down because our own federal government wouldn't be able to pay back its own interest on its money. So I wanted to explain kind of my philosophy on living poor to become rich. And this is basically all the interest that you would pay on a car and on a home and on everything else by living very cheaply for just a couple of years. You can start making a pretty serious nest egg so that everything you purchase from here on out can be cash. That way you're not paying interest on things. And then once you've kind of got yourself established to a place where you're happy and you're comfortable with your standard of living, then you're paying yourself from there on out. So I'm not going to try to make this too long. I'm not going to give too crazy an investment advice because there are better channels for that. But, you know, Dave Ramsey and Clark Howard are two other financiers that kind of say, hey, you know what, by living really close to your means and by paying off your interest and other things, you can get ahead of the curve. And I think that's really the big key to everything, especially if you're just starting out. I wish when I was younger I knew this information, but I didn't listen to AM talk radio where most of this stuff was back in the day. And by knowing this, maybe it's something you can work towards so that even if you're my age at 50 years or 55 years old, you can become fully independent and be able to retire on very little. But if you're young, you can actually set yourself up to be very, very successful. What kicked me off on this, and I've got to mute this because, of course, they have cringe music, is Andrew Tate showing off all his luxury cars. He posted this today, and, you know, he's got Bugattis and Corvettes and God knows what else all in this list, Rolls Royces. And looking at this, I just said, is this guy really happy? He's got so many cars, he can't even drive them all to the function where he's showing them off. And I think this is fine if you want to kind of red pill guys and tell them, hey, man, you can become successful like me, and you need to be in shape and you can be successful. I think that's fine. I have no hate against them. But what if you're not a champion kickboxer and you don't have cam businesses where you can make millions of dollars? Well, as you guys know, I won the contest for the car for the McLaren from Jeremy's Razors. And here's the 2020 McLaren. Now, this is a different one, different color. But I found a similar one and how much it's selling for, and this was published yesterday. Same exact car, 2020. Theirs had, I think, 8,000 miles on it. This one has 9,000. A little bit different color, but other than that, you can see the price is pretty much what the cash got, which is $250,000. So, you know, if you took one of his cars, just one of his cars, and got the cash for it, $250,000, you'd be well on your way. But now, of course, I'm going to tell you what you would do without that money, because obviously we're not all winning contests. But a car payment like that is $2,400 a month, and then the insurance on it. I actually did this rundown on an insurance based on my age and my credit history, and it would be $500 a month or $5,400 a year. So obviously now, of course, again, that's not the direction we're going to be going, but you kind of get the idea that these luxury, fast, amazing cars are seriously expensive. But what if you want to get there, but you're never going to be the rich guy or the extremely successful guy? I think by being smart and by paying yourself instead of other people, which includes for rent and insurance and interest and other things like that, you can do it, and in relatively short course of time. These are my thoughts on it. Again, there's probably a lot of better investors to speak with, but I looked up the average monthly apartment rent in the United States from January 2017 to 2022. And if we look, and if you just have a little one-bedroom studio apartment here, it's going to cost you about $1,100 a month. Let me get my pen here just so I can write some of these numbers down so I don't have to keep referencing the same website. So we'll say 12 grand a year. $12,000 a year, that's what your rent's going to cost you, not including utilities and things like that. Now, some of you people are in areas like me right now in Knoxville, where a studio is going to cost you closer to $1,800. And, if you're out in LA, it's probably $2,500, and in Manhattan, it's $5,000. But if you're in a small town in Alabama, it could be $700 or $800. So anyway, here's just a little studio. Let's say you're living there, and let's say you even own your car and you own nothing. Well, you got to at least make 12 grand plus food, plus utilities, everything else to put a roof over your head. What's the average house price? Let's say you want to go from being a renter to owning a home and having your own property. Well, they said the average house price in the United States right now is $428,700. Now, when you see things like that, if you're a young guy and you say, or I keep saying young guy because they're usually the ones that are getting ready to make the big moves, but let's say you're any guy and you're currently in an apartment and you're currently, living downtown someplace or somewhere else, and you say, I want to be a homeowner, and you look this up and you say, well, I'm never going to own a home, because that's something that you hear a lot of young people complain about. You look up this statistic and you say, well, I'm never going to own a house, that's out. Well, here's digging in a little deeper. The cheapest, if you look through all of this, the cheapest home in the United States right now is in close to Alabama at $200,000. They have some others that are a little bit less, $180,000. These are averages. Oklahoma, $181,000. Ohio, $213,000. Unless you move to East Palestine, and then you can get something for pretty cheap. So they say the typical home price in Alabama is $200,000, which is 48% of typical U.S. price, about half, right? Well, I looked up a loan on a $250,000 house, which is probably more than you'd need. But again, we're just going by low averages here. Down payment of $25,000. Even if you don't have it, to get a home, this is probably what you're looking at. It gives you a loan amount of $225,000. Right now, the best rates, when I clicked on see today's best rates, it popped up, and you can see here, 5.8, 6.3, APR is right there, 6.5. The reason why the APR and the rate's different is probably because of points. Yeah, right here, fees and points. That's why. So if we go back to the, how do I close this down? There we go. So if we go back here, and let's say you decide to finance this for 30 years, you'd be looking at a payment of about $1,800 a month. Now, $1,800 a month, we'll say, $1,000 a month would be $12,000. You take $800 a month, we'll call it $10,000. So you're looking at about $22,000 a year for your payment. So right there, that's going to cost you 10 grand more a year just to move from renting to owning a home, or about roughly $800 to $1,000 more a month. And for a lot of guys, they say, I can't do that, and I don't have the $25,000 down payment. I'm just a schlub. Saving that kind of money is going to be a little bit rough. Well, let's look at average new car prices. And I'll do a summation of all my thoughts here at the end. The average new car sold in November cost $48,000, a record high. That's for the average car. So you look at that and you say, oh my gosh, my car payment here is $713 a month. But even if you buy used, let's say you buy something that's $28,000, you're still talking about $500 a month. That's another $6,000 a year. That's pretty expensive. And that's just with good credit, and that's on a loan term for 72 months. If you wanted to actually be responsible and pay it off in 60 months, it'd be $561 a month. So new houses, new cars, all expensive stuff. And when you look at this stuff, and even if you get a used car, it will say $28,000, $25,000. You're still talking about a $500 monthly payment. For a lot of guys, they say, I can't swing that. And here's your average insurance on that used car, which would be about $100, $120 a month for a male that's 30 years old, typical. So when you see all these things, as anybody, it can be pretty daunting. You can say, man, forget it. I can't afford this stuff. But what if you moved down to, say, a reliable car with no bells and whistles, no thrills, as long as the engine is reliable. Now, yeah, if your radio goes out or your air conditioning stops working, it sucks. But if you were able to rough it through for even just a couple of years, year or two, which I actually did in Florida. I lived in Florida with a car that had no air conditioning. Let me tell you, that sucked. But after a while, you actually kind of get used to it when you're not spoiled all the time. Like when I went to the Philippines, they would bathe sometimes twice a day, once in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon after going out for a walk or spending time outside, and then once again in the evening just to get themselves wet, cool down a little bit, put a fan on yourself. You can manage. But if you're willing to make just a little bit of sacrifice for a little bit of time, you can get ahead of that curve. So let's say you went out there and you saved up and you got yourself a used decent car for, we'll call it 10 grand. I think you can still get a decent used car for 10 grand. I didn't pull up a bunch of stuff on this. But that right there is going to save you, what, $15,000 to $30,000, $40,000? And what if you went out and just bought raw property? Now, again, I'm not doing all the extreme research on this stuff, but I'm, again, just trying to put little seeds in your mind so that maybe they can grow into something. But I looked in Alabama. I just picked a random place in Daleville, Alabama, because that was the cheapest areas where homes were. But I can tell you that in Tennessee and Texas and Oklahoma and Nebraska, several of the other kind of middle of the country states where you can get more land, you can find similar land in all these areas. And here I just picked, this is 1 acre, and it's for $12,000. Now, an acre of land is not bad. If you look at most new homes, actually, like the $250,000 property or the $300,000-$400,000 properties, most of them are sitting on a quarter of an acre, between 0.15 and 0.25 acres. Here you're getting 4 times that amount of land for 12 grand. So let's take our $10,000 car and our $12,000 land, and let's say you're going to have to pay the electric company to put up a pole to get it to the house, your electric to the house, because we're not living out in God's land here. This is actually, if you look on the map here, you can see that this is actually right next to the road, although it's kind of got two. I keep hovering over the map, even though you can see it's close enough to the road. You can get city water, city septic, city electric, and most of the time those hookups, they just to run them from the property line, usually they give you 100 yards, or I forget how far they give you, that the utility companies will pay for. But even if they don't, even if they say, hey, you know what, to run a septic line, water line, electric line, it's going to cost you, we'll call it $3 grand. Well, then you're at 15 grand for your property, right? So you've got a very beat up car for 10 grand. You get your land for 15 grand with your utilities hooked up. Now where are you going to live? Well, I looked up an RV, and this is just on RV Trader, and this is something that is within 100, I think this one was within 50 or 100 miles of the piece of property that we were just looking at. Now this is a used RV. It's a 2007. And here's the thing. If you do an inspection on this vehicle and the top of it is still watertight, a tube or two of caulk, like $20, is usually enough to refurbish a roof on these things to seal them up to where they're waterproof. Now, you want to make sure they haven't had leaks in the walls and everything else. But just the maintenance on this stuff with these aluminum tops and everything else, or thin steel, is a little bit of caulk around the edges. Might cost you $50 in caulk to seal up every little thing on this. Then you can always get some tarps and cover up the slide outs. Because again, we're not looking necessarily to be pretty. We want it to be functional. So you can cover the slide outs with tarps if they're leaking a little bit. And if you look at the photos on the inside of this thing, your relatively modern shower here. You've got a stove, you've got a cooktop, you've got a microwave. Got a sink. Now, all this furniture, since you're not necessarily towing this around the country, you could change out. Like, for example, if this is a travel mattress to save weight, you could replace this with a traditional mattress. But you look through here, and it's, well, got a little bit of furniture and enough for your clothes. It's quite a bit of living room here for one person. It's plenty big enough. And you could replace all the furniture if need be. And you could hook this up to your septic and your water and your electric and live in this thing. How much is this RV? It's $18,000. Could you haggle them down to 16, 15, depending on how long this has been sitting on the lot? Yep. And if you say, well, I don't have a vehicle to tow this huge thing, actually a lot of these dealerships will deliver them for you. I know this firsthand because I've talked to a couple around here in Knoxville, and I thought about maybe getting a used one and putting it up on my property until my house is built, because my rent here costs me almost $2,000 a month, which in a year, you're talking about 25 grand. Well, I could buy one of these, prop it up on the land, live out of it. Now, why haven't I done that? Because I'm still waiting for electric permits for the electric, permits for the septic, permits for the water, and everything else. I'm moving out to the property. So I could put the trailer out there, but I don't have any electrical, water, or anything else. And I'm far enough away from the road that it's going to cost me a lot more to have the utilities run to my property. So in my case, I actually purchased too big a property at 25 acres. Now, since I'm patient, it'll work. But again, let's say delivered and everything else, let's say it costs you 18 grand, right? Again, we're not talking about Shea luxury here, but it's certainly livable. And then I'm going to talk about market returns. So for the $10,000 for your used beat up car, but it's still relatively reliable. For 15 grand for the land and all the hookups. For your trailer at 18 grand, you're looking at $42,000, which is less than the average price of a new car. For the same price that new fancy car would get you, you've now got a piece of property. You've got your utilities hooked up, and a nice piece of property at 1 acre. You can move up to 2 and 3 acres for, I want to say, maybe twice the price that I found. But for the price of a new car, now you've established yourself with a used vehicle, an RV. And if the RV is in relatively good condition, again, I'm just trying to pull up. There were some that were $8,000, $7,000, but they were, they're pretty old. You've kind of established yourself now to where you have land, you have your utilities, you have a place to sleep. It wouldn't be great in the winter. I mean, let's be honest, but there are various ways that you can put little micro wood stoves in an RV safely. I know I did it in my school bus. There are ways that you can actually do little oil canister furnaces that would keep something like this warm based off of like cooking oil, that you can heat a place this small for $30, $40 a winter without having to use electric heaters and everything else. Again, this is me tossing some ideas out there. So let's say instead of making a car payment, so here's the thing, right? Your auto payment on that $42,000 would be $852 a month for 60 months. If you did it all the way out to 72 months, you're looking at $740 a month for that vehicle, right? But now, if you went out and got, say, a home loan or a property loan on that stuff, let me go back here to my land mortgage stuff. Let's say that in the home value, you put in $45,000. And again, I'm not saying that loans necessarily work like this. I'm not saying you could do it. And let's say instead of a 6.5% rate, you paid a 10% rate because it's raw land or whatever. No, I didn't want to click that button. Let's recalculate it. Your payment on that land would be $619 for 188 months. Where the vehicle, let me go back to my vehicle payment here, wherever I've got it. Where that vehicle would be $740 a month, you'd be paying $619, and that's for 188 months, which is ridiculously long. But even your total interest that you pay on that would be only $3,500. No, I'm sorry. Total interest paid would be $97,000, which is ridiculous. You would definitely not want to do that. But what if you, instead of having the term be 30 years, what if you put the term at, 10 years? Your payment is only $819, about the same as the car. And what if you say, well, instead of rent, since I'm paying this, let's figure out what it would cost me if I had the same payment as my rent. There's $972 payment for 7 years. So even if you just compared apple to apples and said, I don't have the extra money, all I can afford is just my rent for the $10,000 car, for an RV, for the land, for all the utility hookups, if you did a loan for that for 7 years, it's the same price. So the difference is, though, that in 7 years, instead of paying 7 years of rent for nothing, you now own land. You've had a place to live. So at least you've got the land for you. So you've tucked some in the bank. And again, these are just ideas. Don't sit down here and talk to me about the math and the this and the, we can all find problems with what I'm working with. But again, it's just trying to open up a different way to look at things. That's all I'm doing. So let's say that you've done this. You're living in your little trailer and you've got excess money left over. There's lots of things you can invest in. And yes, right now might not be the best in time to invest in this or invest in that. Again, I got that. But if you look at the average return in the stock market, it's about 10% per year for nearly the last century. Now, that includes the Great Depression and all the other bad things that have happened in the market. It's about 10% per year. Well, what if you if you calculate a 10% per year return and you get a stock that is not only a growth stock but pays dividend yields, such as McDonald's, for example. McDonald's, I think, pays a 2.2% dividend yield. I don't know if they still do, but last time I checked it, they did. Let's say that you're going to get, on average, a 12.5% return on your money. Again, this is best case scenario, but again, this is just more to chew on. And let's say you started with $20,000. Now, where did I come up with the $20,000? The $20,000 that you saved on getting a newer car. The $20,000 that you're going to save in a year or two of renting, if you just end up buying any of this for cash, a raise, or you getting a part-time job, or even a second full-time job. A little bit of sacrifice in the beginning can lead to many bonuses down the way. And then when you're working, instead of having that 7-year loan on the land and on the property and on all that stuff, let's say you just pay it off. Now you have an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month. And I'm saying this is as if you're making close to minimum wage. But now you say, okay, well, I got $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 a month disposable income. What am I going to do? Well, live in your little trailer, baby along that old car. You'll have your land paid off. And then within a couple of years, let's say you can deposit $20,000. Actually, let's just do this. Let's say you start off with $0,000. But every month you put what you were paying in rent and maybe a car payment, $1,500 a month, into the stock market, into an interest-bearing dividend yield or a growth dividend yield account. At the end of 20 years, I'm 55, I'm 50. So I said, well, what if I want to retire at 65 or 70? My total contributions of $1,500 a month over the next 20 years would be $360,000. But the total interest I would have gained on that money is $1.2 million. Now, let's say the stock market does worse than expected and you only get an 8% return. I still would have put in $360,000, but I'd be getting back for free $523,000 for an end balance of $883,000. If you're a young person and instead of putting in $1,000 a month, you can only put in $500 a month, but say you're 25 and you want to retire at 65 and you have 40 years worth of investment at $500 a month adding, you'll have put in $240,000, but you'll get almost $1.5 million in interest and you'll have close to $2 million. Time is definitely on your side, which is why if you're a young person, the younger you are and you start thinking this way, the better off you'll be in the long run. So then, by the time you retire, if you want that $250,000 car, you can afford it and you'll still have $1.5 million left over and you'll be on your own property. Now, of course, over time, what you'll end up doing is instead of living in that used RV, maybe you'll have a small home built. Maybe you'll get a double wide trailer or what do they call them now? I guess modular homes. You can get modular homes for great prices, but that doesn't have to be your first option. Does this require sacrifice? Of course. Does this mean that you're going to probably have, some issues, some repair issues, some other things to deal with? Yes. But you're going to have that on any house you buy, even if they're brand new half the time. And once you have this kind of money in the bank sitting there, now if you take your annual contributions and change that to 0, and you just want to say after 1 year, but I've got now $1.8 million. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. You have $1.8 million after 1 year at an 8% interest rate compounded yearly, and you don't add any money in. The interest yearly on that $1.8 million will pay you $150,000 a year for sitting on your ass. When you hear people like Warren Buffett, I think, famously said, you're never going to become rich unless you can make money while you're asleep. This is how you make money while you're asleep. Yes, again, maybe my math is flawed. Maybe I'm forgetting a lot of things. But the whole premise that I want you guys to think about here is that by making sacrifices early, instead of getting behind the 8 ball on things, instead of purchasing things you may not need, go out and get yourself a little plot of land, even if it means moving. Maybe that's the opportunity to look for a new job or a better job. Maybe it gives you the opportunity to, to make that fresh start in life you need. You can get a little plot of land that is close enough to hook up to utilities, just a raw spot of land, for pretty cheap, between 10, 20 grand. Get a little trailer, get that used vehicle, get yourself set up. Now, yes, if you're, if compared to other people, right, the people that have the fancy houses and the fancy cars and everything else, you're going to look pretty poor. You're going to be living pretty close to the ground. But if you don't let your ego get in the way and you don't let your pride get in the way, you'll come to realize that the people that are buying that fancy house, the people that are buying or living not even in that fancy a house, but if you take a $250,000 house, right? And even if they put down, 10%, and the interest rate is, 6%, and you do a 30-year mortgage, because this is what most people do. They're paying, we'll call it $1,700 a month. And then they've got that new car that you're so jealous of, and that costs them $700, $800 a month. That's $2,500 a month that they're paying out, and they're going to be paying that for the next 30 years. Where instead, if you put that money to work for yourself in 10 or 20 years, you'll be able to have the same things that they have. The only difference is you don't have to work for it. Your money's now working for it that you saved, and you can use that interest to buy these things if you want them. If you live in a little used trailer and take care of it, and you're willing to live that way for 5, 7, 10 years, and you stuff all this money into the bank into decent investments, you can get, the dividend yield. I did the calculations on how much money you'd make if you sold, like if you're getting a 10% return, for example, right? If you're getting a 10% return, you'd have to sell that stock every year to get that money. That's not what we're talking about. That wouldn't, but if you took that 1.8 million years, and instead of an 8% return rate, you take a 2%, which is, we'll call that the dividend yield, right? You can get dividend yields. And if you, instead of rolling those dividends over to buy you more stock, instead of doing that, if you said, I'm going to cash out my dividends, but you have that $1.8 million a year, you're looking at $36,000 a year income where you're not working. And you don't have anything to pay for yearly because you own the property. I mean, you've got your utilities and tax. Again, we're talking big picture stuff here. So in the course of a year, basically, maybe 2 years, on that money, you just sitting on it. You don't have to work and you can make 40 grand a year. And if you are working, of course, you'll be making a lot more than that by the time that you're, an older person. 36 grand a year is about $3,000 a month. Let's say Social Security here in the United States, let's say your benefits, your government goes bankrupt. Well, you might have to save for 2 or 3 years, but if you save, after taxes and everything on 36 grand, let's say you take home 30 grand, 25 grand. Well, that 25 grand, if you save for 2 years, living close to your means, while you're not working and you own everything, there's your new car. There's your $50,000 new car, and you don't have to pay anything for it. You've just relaxed and not spent money, and now you can go buy that new car in cash. I'm not saying that these numbers are exactly accurate. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be more or less expensive where you are. I'm saying today you don't have an excuse not to be able to live on a piece of property and own things and get ahead of the curve. Even if you're a young person that is not raking in tons of money, you can still get ahead of it. Just you have to live close to the ground. You have to swallow your pride a little bit and drive a beat-up car and maybe live in an old trailer. But I'll also tell you that living in that trailer on an acre of land that you can, farm on if you want to, or have pets or animals or just privacy, you're going to be a hell of a lot more happy there than in some apartment where you got neighbors. Every neighbor I've ever had in every apartment sounds like they're elephants wearing refrigerators as shoes as they wrestle at 2 o'clock in the morning. At least that's done. At least you'll be able to step out your front door and touch your own grass. And then with the money you save, you can get a little shed, or you can buy a little outbuilding. As a matter of fact, there's some really nice sheds. I'm just going to show you prefab sheds. Here's one of the, this is actually the building that I'm putting up on my property where I'm building my home, but the home is going to take probably 18 months to 2 years to build. So I poured a slab that cost me about 20 grand, and this building kind of configured like this where it's got 2 windows on each side. It does have a center garage door that's 10 feet by 10 feet. And then it's got the side garage door that's 9 feet by 8 feet. And instead of over here on the far left side, so the third door here off to the left, this one's going to be a regular walk-in door. It's 50 feet wide by about 30 feet long. That's, 25 feet long, I think. So it's about 1,300 square feet, completely open building. Total cost is going to cost me about $45,000 for the cement slab and the building. I'm putting in a well, 10 grand. Septic tank, we'll call it 10 grand. Some solar, we'll call it 10 grand. So 30,000. So now I'm up to 80 grand. And then I put closed foam spray insulation, or some 2-inch closed foam all the way around it, and then I can put regular insulation on top of it. We'll call it 5 to 10 grand more. For $85,000 on my land, I will have a fully functional home, basically. All I have to do is put in a couple of window air conditioners or maybe a heat pump, put in a wood stove, and it's a completely open bay. And from there, I've already made sure that when they poured the concrete, I had a septic out and a water in. And then I can have the local electric company run the hookup straight to this. So I'll have city electric, and then I'll put in a little bit of solar maybe within time. And yes, in the end, it's going to cost me $80,000. What will I do with it? I'll either use it as a garage, or since my home is probably going to have a garage, well, it is going to have a 2-car garage attached to it, I'll end up renting this out. A 1,200 square foot building like this in this area, I can probably rent it for $1,200, $1,500 a month. And since it's septic and my well water and probably solar, I won't have any utilities to pay for it. So 1 month rent will go towards my taxes for my entire property. So I won't even have land tax to pay for. And the other, 10 or 11 months out of the year is pure income. I do that for 2 years. The building is paid for itself. The insulation, the concrete, everything's paid for itself. And it's far away from enough from my home that it won't invade on my privacy. And then if I just decide, okay, I'm not going to have a renter anymore after 2-3 years or whatever it is, the building's paid for itself. Now I have a fully functioning, insulated, really nice steel building that I never paid for. I mean, I paid for it, but in the long run, I will have not paid for. Someone else ended up paying for it. Who? You. Unless you decide to do this for yourself. But you can get to the point of doing this by buying the land, by living cheaply. And then you build this building, and then you can get rid of the trailer or keep the trailer. And that way, if you want to go on vacation and travel, if you can work from the road, you can take it down and stay in Texas during the winter, and you can take it up to, I don't know, Alaska in the summertime, whatever the heck you want to do. But that's how you get ahead, is you let money pay for your things, interest pay for your things. You let other people renting for you pay for your things. And this is kind of the same idea that I have for my land that I'm going to do for the men's retreat. It'll probably have a building just like this. The difference is it'll be a little bit bigger. It'll have some bunk beds in there, and then I'll have some campground spots. So if people bring their own trailers or tents, I'll have a game room. I'll have a bar, a place to sit down and eat, maybe some sports on the TV, maybe a pool table. And I'll probably, instead of having one bathroom, I'll probably have 2 toilets and 2 showers. And that way, if people don't, if I've got half a dozen guys or a dozen guys there, you don't have to wait around all day to get a hot shower. That's how you do it. That's how I think I'm going to end up doing the men's retreat, and not having it cost me an arm and a leg is that way through either small donations or the work that I do on YouTube and Rumble and all the rest of it, and my donations over at Locals. It'll be able to be self-sustaining. That's the idea. All I'm trying to do is give you ideas of how to get ahead of the curve, how to make this work for you, and get to a place where your money is making you money. And even at my age, if I were starting over again at 50 years old, I'd probably go work 2 jobs, or a full-time and a part-time job. And if I didn't have the land and I didn't have a vehicle and I was just starting from scratch, I'd have to finance that first little beater-up car. But I'd work my tail off and pay it off. And maybe I have rent. Well, I again, even after I have the car paid off, I keep busting my butt until I have enough for land. And then see if I can get maybe a loan on the RV for a couple of years, because the payment on an older RV like that would be a lot less than rent would be. And maybe it takes me a couple of years to pay off the RV, but then I own it. Then I own the land and I own the RV. And then what do I do with the extra money? Start investing it. Start saving up for a steel building like this. Start doing something with it. It's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to make sacrifices. But if you do, and the sooner you do, the more likely it is that you're going to do better. You're going to do well for yourself. Because then at a certain point, you can continue to make good money. And if you're living for free and you don't have any car payments or anything else, then if you're, slowly becoming more successful and you're making 40, 50 grand a year, and you put that money straight into investments after you've done your minimal financial needs of car registration and insurance and utilities and land taxes and things like that, that's how you're going to get it to where you can retire and have a comfortable life, even if Social Security or government pensions or the rest can't pay you anymore. That you don't own anyone, or you don't owe anyone other than the government, unfortunately. And then your money can pay you in your retirement years. That's what my father and mother did. He did get a pension from work, but it wasn't a ton. But he owned everything. So between a pension and Social Security and his investments, he was very successful. He retired at the age of 55, lived until he was, 86, I think? And in those 31 years, they never wanted for money, never had to work, never had to stress, because they owned everything, and his investments and everything else made all the payments on everything for him. His money paid his bills. His money made his money. That's the way to think of this. So that's my ideas, guys. You ask for content like this. It's never the most popular, but if you're still with me after the whole video, I hope this helps you out some. Occasionally, I'll do stuff with ideas. And again, I'm not saying my math is 100% right on this, but it's just to put a little seed in your mind to give you something to think about. And then if you do this route too, the other thing that's nice is you have a completely empty building that's ready for whatever you want. So if you want to put a loft in it and put your bedroom up there, or you want to have a game room, or you want to design a bathroom in a certain way, you can go get the lumber, you can frame it out, you can in some cases, depending on your municipality and everything else, you might be able to run the electric as needed and just have somebody come in and inspect it and sign off on it. You can do the work. Then you're learning something. It gives you a hobby. It gives you a project. And it's done the way you want. And this is how, over time, when you talk to, older people like my father, and it's like, how do you know so much about plumbing? Or how do you know how to fix this? Or how do you know how to run electric? Or how do you know? It's because they did it. But it wasn't a job. It wasn't, this is something I have to do. It was done as a passion project. And that way you don't feel rushed and you can take time to learn. And my father didn't have YouTube. He learned from his father. And he learned by trial and error. Today with YouTube and everything else out there, you have no excuse not to do some of this stuff for yourself. And again, it gives you something to do. So, that's my idea. That's my thought process. This is literally the building I'm going to be building, except for the far left garage door is going to be a walk-in entry, a regular door. And I can put in a wood stove and close foam insulate it and maybe put a couple of like either a heat pump or air conditioner or something in there. And then it makes not necessarily a gorgeous home, but I have 1,200 square feet of open space to design things the way I want. And if I want to eat dinner as I'm sitting there and my motorcycle's 3 feet to my right while I work on it and watch sports up on a big screen TV or whatever, I can. It's all about options. Just make it available for yourself. So there you go, guys. I hope this helps. I'd love to hear what you guys think down below, and we'll talk to you in the next one.